Finn Dorsey. But she and Finn had never told that part of the story, because he'd been there with a proper date, and he would have never wanted his parents or anyone else to know he was sneaking off with someone like Liv Arias. She'd first dragged him into the closet to fight with him, to let him know how she felt about being passed over for his student council president date. But fighting had only stoked the fire that had burned between them back then. Young, misguided, completely inconvenient lust. They'd been rounding second base when they'd heard the first shots fired.
What happened when you were in the hallway?
Liv didn't want to picture it again. She'd wrestled with flashbacks for so long that it felt like inviting the devil in for another stay. Her only reprieve since that awful year had been 100% avoidance, cutting herself off from everything and everyone from back then. Letting the scene run through her mind could be too much, but there was no helping it. The images came anyway.
When I heard the shots and screaming, I hid in the janitor's closet. She and Finn had thought it was some kind of prom prank, until they'd heard Finn's date, Rebecca, shout the word, "Gun!"
Gun. A tiny 3-letter word that had knocked their world off its axis and punted it into a different dimension forever.
So you never saw the shooters?
Liv gripped her elbows, trying to keep the inner chill from becoming visible, shivering, and ignored the pine scent of the janitor's disinfectant that burned her nose, as if she were right there again. She still couldn't buy a real Christmas tree because of that smell. I didn't see anyone until Joseph opened the door. Because Finn had left her. The second he'd heard Rebecca scream, he'd bailed on Liv. He'd said something to her, but she could never recall what. All she remembered was him leaving, and in his rush to save his real date, he'd inadvertently alerted Joseph to Liv's presence. He pointed the gun at me and yelled at me to stand up. Her voice caught on the last bit, snagging on the sharp memory, bringing back that all-encompassing fear that she was in her last minutes. She'd learned to mostly manage the panic attacks that had plagued her after that night. But that moment was always the image that haunted her most. When she saw the barrel of that gun pointing at her, the scared but determined eyes of her former lab partner drilling into her like cold steel.
But Joseph didn't pull the trigger?
Liv looked down at her hands, turning her mother's wedding band round and round. No, he knew who I was. I wasn't on his list.
Meaning?
There was no way Daniel didn't know what that meant. The media had latched on to the killer's manifesto like ants on honey. Joseph and Trevor had chosen prom night for a very particular reason. Not to take out the popular people or people who'd wronged them. They wanted to take out the happy ones.
If you can be happy in a fucked up world like this, then you're blind and too stupid to live.
That had been the motto of their mission. Liv hadn't been deemed a happy one and had been spared, but she wasn't going to say it and open herself up to the question of why she hadn't been happy. There'd been enough speculation in the press back when it had happened. What was broken with all those lucky survivors? Were they the mean kids, the depressed kids, the damaged kids, friends of the killers? Joseph and I had worked together on a project in chemistry. We weren't friends, but I'd been nice to him. And he'd been nice to her. But she'd also seen part of him that would haunt her later. When she'd worried that their project wouldn't be up to par, he'd assured her that the rest of the class was filled with idiots, jocks, and assholes, so they'd look like geniuses in comparison. He'd smirked at her and said,
I mean, seriously, someone should just put them out of their misery. Save us the trouble of having to deal with them.
Back then, she'd already been a subscriber to the Church of Sarcasm and had no love lost for many of her classmates, so she'd taken his comment as such and agreed with him. Now the memory of that conversation made her sick. She'd reassured a killer that he was right, given him more fuel for his bonfire. He cursed at me, told me to stay put, and wedged a chair against the outside of the door. She rubbed her lips together. After that, I heard more shots.
Presumably when he and Trevor shot at,
Daniel checked his notes,
Finn Dorsey and Rebecca Lint.
Liv reached for her water and took a slow sip.